"Excuse me, Signora. That's not what the menu says." The words were soft, respectful, almost impossible to hear above the gentle music drifting through the restaurant. Yet the moment those words reached Luca Moretti's ears, time seemed to stop. His crystal wine glass froze halfway to his lips. Across the table, his 72-year-old mother slowly lifted her head. For a second, neither of them moved, because the young woman standing beside their table had not spoken in English. She had spoken in Italian. Not just Italian, Sicilian, Old Sicilian, the kind spoken in tiny villages overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. The kind Luca had not heard outside his family in years. The entire dining room continued as normal. Silverware clinked against plates. Waiters crossed polished marble floors. Conversations floated beneath the glow of golden chandeliers. Yet at table 12 something had shifted. Something no one else seemed to notice. Maria Moretti stared at the young waitress as if she had seen a ghost from another lifetime. "What did you say, child?" she asked quietly in Italian. The waitress smiled. It was a small smile, warm, unassuming. "I said the menu translation is incorrect, Signora," she replied. "The chef is using rosemary, not basil." Maria blinked. Then she laughed. A genuine laugh. The first one Luca had heard from her all evening. It was a sound that instantly drew his attention. His mother rarely laughed in public anymore. Since losing her husband years ago, she had become quieter, more withdrawn. Most evenings, she barely touched her food during business dinners. But now she was smiling. Actually smiling. Luca slowly lowered his glass onto the white tablecloth. His sharp gray eyes studied the waitress. She looked ordinary enough. Black uniform, simple apron, hair neatly pulled back. No jewelry except a tiny silver cross around her neck. Nothing about her appearance suggested she belonged in the world of international languages or cultural studies. Yet her accent was flawless. Not rehearsed, not learned from an app. It sounded lived in, like someone who had carried those words in her heart for years. "Naomi," her name tag read. Maria reached for her hand. "Where did you learn to speak like that?" she asked. The young woman hesitated, just briefly. Then she answered with a softness that somehow made the moment feel even more mysterious. "From someone very important to me, Signora." Luca felt a strange sensation in his chest. Curiosity, the one emotion he rarely allowed himself. For 20 years he had built a billion-dollar shipping empire by reading people faster than they could read him. Yet this woman made no sense. Before he could speak, Maria suddenly asked another question. This time in a rare Sicilian phrase that even many Italians no longer recognized. A phrase Luca's grandfather used to whisper during family gatherings when he was a boy. Surely the waitress would not understand that. Surely. But Naomi's eyes brightened instantly. Then she answered with the perfect response. The exact response. Maria's hand flew to her mouth. Luca's heartbeat slowed. The restaurant faded away, because there was only one explanation for what he had just witnessed. And he was almost certain it was impossible. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Maria Moretti continued staring at Naomi, as though she were trying to solve a mystery hidden behind a familiar face. The older woman slowly shook her head and smiled to herself. "I have not heard that expression in 40 years, she said quietly in Italian. "Not since my father passed away." Naomi lowered her eyes respectfully. "He must have been a wonderful man," she replied. Maria's smile softened. "He was stubborn, loud, impossible to argue with. But yes, wonderful." A gentle warmth settled over the table. The kind of warmth that could not be purchased, negotiated, or scheduled into a calendar. Luca noticed it immediately because it was something missing from most rooms he entered. People usually became tense around him. Executives straightened their posture. Employees chose their words carefully. Investors watched every reaction on his face. Yet Naomi seemed completely unaffected by his presence. She was focused entirely on his mother, as though the billionaire sitting 3 feet away did not matter at all. The realization irritated him more than it should have. Where? exactly are you from? Luca asked. Naomi turned toward him. Calm. Professional. Chicago, sir. The answer only deepened the mystery. Chicago.
Luca repeated.
And you learned Sicilian dialect in Chicago? A small smile touched her lips. Life introduces us to people we do not expect. It was not really an answer. Luca knew that. Naomi knew that too. Yet somehow she delivered the response so politely that pressing further would feel rude. Maria laughed softly again. I like her. Luca raised an eyebrow. Mama, you like everyone. No, Maria replied immediately. I tolerate most people. Naomi tried to hide her smile. Luca almost smiled himself. Almost. Then a nearby server approached carrying their entrees. The moment broke. Plates were carefully placed on the table. Fresh herbs scented the air. Glasses reflected the soft chandelier light overhead. Naomi thanked the server and began checking that everything was correct. Her movements were efficient, graceful, quiet. Yet Luca found himself watching her more closely now. Small details stood out. The way she noticed a fork slightly out of place and adjusted it without thinking. The way she remembered exactly which tea Maria preferred despite never having served them before. The way she seemed to anticipate needs before anyone voiced them. None of those things were extraordinary on their own. Together, they suggested something else. Training, education, discipline. A life story that did not match the uniform she wore. As Naomi stepped away toward another table, Maria continued watching her. She carries herself like your grandmother, she said unexpectedly. Luca looked up. Nah. Maria nodded. The same quiet confidence. The same eyes. People underestimate women like that. Luca glanced across the dining room. Naomi was helping an elderly couple understand the dessert menu. Patient, unhurried, fully present. You are building stories in your head already, he said. Maria reached for her teacup. Perhaps. She took a sip. Then her expression changed. Only slightly, but Luca noticed. He always noticed changes in his mother's face. What is it? He asked. Maria looked down at the tea. Nothing. The answer came. Too quickly. Luca's attention sharpened. Mama. She hesitated. The bracelet she wears. Luca frowned. What about it? Maria stared toward Naomi once more. Her voice dropped almost to a whisper. I have seen that bracelet before. A chill of curiosity moved through Luca. Where? Maria's fingers tightened around the cup. For the first time all evening, uncertainty appeared in her eyes. That is what I am trying to remember. Maria's words lingered over the table long after she stopped speaking. Luca looked again toward Naomi. The bracelet was simple. Silver. Slightly worn. Nothing about it appeared remarkable. Yet his mother continued staring at it as though a forgotten memory was slowly finding its way home. Are you certain? Luca asked. Maria nodded slowly. Not completely, but it feels familiar. She looked down at the table. You know how certain songs can bring back a memory you forgot existed? Luca did know. Business had taught him to trust facts. His mother trusted feelings. Somehow, more often than not, both approaches led to the same truth. Across the dining room, Naomi moved between tables with quiet confidence. She never rushed, never seemed overwhelmed. Even during the busiest moments, she carried herself with a calm that drew attention without asking for it. A young server accidentally dropped a stack of menus nearby. Naomi immediately knelt to help gather them. No frustration. No embarrassment. Just kindness. The younger employee smiled with relief. Naomi smiled back. Then she returned to work. Luca watched the exchange carefully. Most people changed behavior when they thought nobody important was looking. Naomi did not. That intrigued him more than her language skills. You are studying her again, Maria said. You always do that when something puzzles you. Luca took a sip of water. People reveal themselves eventually. And what do you think she is revealing? Maria asked. He considered the question. That she does not belong here. Maria laughed softly. Neither do most of the people eating here. Before Luca could answer, Naomi returned carrying a small dessert tray. Compliments of the chef, she said. He heard it is your birthday.
Signora.
Maria's eyes widened. How did he know? Naomi smiled. You mentioned it while we were talking. Maria looked delighted. You remembered. Of course. The older woman seemed touched by something so small. Naomi carefully placed a slice of lemon cake in front of her. The chef said this is his mother's recipe. Maria clasped her hands together. Then I must try it. Naomi stepped back. Enjoy. As she turned to leave, Maria suddenly spoke. Wait. Naomi paused. Yes, Signora? Maria pointed gently toward the bracelet. May I ask where you got that? For the first time all evening, Naomi seemed surprised. Her hand instinctively moved toward the bracelet resting on her wrist. This? She asked softly. Maria nodded. A strange silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, just unexpected. Naomi glanced down at the bracelet for a moment before answering. It belonged to my grandmother. Luca noticed something change in her expression. Not sadness exactly, more like affection mixed with memory. She gave it to me when I was 10 years old. Naomi continued. I have worn it almost every day since. Maria's eyes widened slightly. Your grandmother? Yes. Naomi smiled. She raised me for most of my childhood. Maria leaned forward. Was she Italian? Naomi looked genuinely surprised by the question. Actually, yes. Luca felt his attention sharpen immediately. Maria exchanged a glance with him. Then she looked back at Naomi. What was her name? Naomi opened her mouth to answer. Then her eyes drifted toward the restaurant entrance. Her expression changed instantly. Someone had just walked through the front door. And whatever she saw made all the warmth leave her face. The change happened so quickly that Luca almost thought he imagined it. 1 second Naomi had been smiling. The next, every trace of warmth disappeared from her face. Her shoulders stiffened. Her eyes locked on the restaurant entrance. Instinctively, Luca turned to look. A man in an expensive navy suit had just entered the dining room. He appeared to be in his late 50s. Well-dressed, confident, the kind of person accustomed to being recognized. The hostess greeted him immediately. Several employees seemed to know who he was. Yet what caught Luca's attention was not the man himself. It was Naomi's reaction to him. She looked away almost instantly, too quickly, like someone hoping not to be noticed. Naomi? Maria asked gently. Naomi blinked and forced a small smile back onto her face. I am sorry, Signora. I need to help another table. Before either of them could ask another question, she stepped away. Her pace remained professional, calm. Yet Luca sensed something underneath. Attention that had not been there before. Maria watched her disappear toward the far side of the dining room. Something is wrong, she said quietly. Perhaps. Luca continued observing the room. The man in the navy suit was being escorted to a private corner table. He shook hands with the manager. They exchanged a few words. Then the manager glanced briefly toward Naomi. It lasted less than a second. But Luca noticed. He always noticed. Do you know him? Maria asked. Luca shook his head. No, yet something about the situation felt unusual. Across the restaurant, Naomi remained busy serving customers. She smiled when appropriate, answered questions, delivered orders. To everyone else, she probably looked exactly the same. But once you noticed the difference, it became impossible to ignore. She was avoiding one side of the dining room entirely, specifically the side where the man was seated. Maria slowly set down her fork. You never answered my question. Luca looked back at her. Which one? You said she does not belong here. Maria's eyes followed Naomi across the room. Why? Luca considered his answer carefully. Because she moves like someone who has spent years studying people. Maria smiled knowingly. And because she speaks a dialect almost nobody knows. And
Luca exhaled.
Because she looks at people directly when she talks to them. Most people either look down or look at what they want. She actually pays attention. Maria nodded. Exactly. For a few moments they sat in silence. Then Maria's expression softened. Your father used to say something similar. Luca looked up. About what? About people with hidden stories. She smiled faintly. He said they always reveal themselves eventually, not through words, through small moments. Luca glanced toward Naomi again. Small moments. That was exactly what he had been seeing all evening. The language, the bracelet, the reaction at the door. Each detail alone meant nothing. Together they formed a puzzle. Then another moment arrived. Naomi approached the private table carrying a tray. She had no choice now. The section belonged to her.
Luca watched carefully.
The man looked up. Their eyes met. For a brief second, neither moved. Recognition flashed across his face. Immediate. Certain. Naomi lowered the tray onto the table. The man said something. Luca could not hear the words. Naomi answered politely. Then she stepped back. The man's expression changed. Surprise gave way to something else. Something closer to disbelief. He stood up so abruptly that nearby diners turned to look. Naomi froze. The entire exchange lasted perhaps 3 seconds. Yet it felt much longer. Then the man spoke again. This time loud enough for several nearby tables to hear. Naomi, he said, is that really you? The dining room seemed to hold its breath. Conversations faded into the background. Even the soft music felt distant. Naomi stood perfectly still beside the table, her tray balanced carefully in one hand. The man continued staring at her as though he could not believe what he was seeing. Naomi, he repeated, his voice quieter this time. After all these years. Several guests glanced in their direction before returning to their meals. To them, it was simply an unexpected reunion. To Naomi, it clearly meant something more. Luca could see it in the way her fingers tightened slightly around the tray. Good evening, Mr. Whitmore, she said politely. Her voice remained calm, professional. Yet the warmth she had shown Maria was gone. Completely gone. The man seemed almost hurt by the formality. Mr. Whitmore? He said with a nervous laugh. That is how you greet me now? Naomi offered a courteous smile. Can I get you anything this evening, sir? The question landed like a closed door. Whatever connection existed between them, she was making it clear that it belonged in the past. Mr. Whitmore looked at her for several long seconds. Then he slowly sat back down. No, he said quietly. I suppose not. Naomi nodded and stepped away. The moment she disappeared into the kitchen corridor, the man lowered his eyes. He suddenly looked older than before. Not physically, emotionally, as though a memory had found him when he least expected it. Luca exchanged a glance with his mother. Maria had been watching the entire interaction. He knows her, she said softly. Obviously.
No, Maria replied.
Not like an old friend. Like someone carrying regret. Luca did not respond. He was too busy thinking. Naomi had spoken 6 languages tonight without showing off. She had connected instantly with his mother through memories she should not have known. She wore a bracelet linked somehow to an Italian grandmother. And now a wealthy businessman appeared shocked to find her working as a waitress. None of it fit together. Across the room, Mr. Whitmore remained seated alone. He no longer looked at the menu. Instead, his gaze occasionally drifted toward the kitchen entrance. Waiting, hoping, remembering. 10 minutes later, Naomi emerged carrying another order. She moved through the restaurant as if nothing unusual had happened. Yet Luca noticed she deliberately chose paths that avoided Mr. Whitmore's table. Eventually, Maria leaned back in her chair. You are going to investigate, are you not? Luca almost smiled. I am not investigating anyone. Of course not. Maria's expression said she did not believe him for a second. Just then, the restaurant manager approached their table. Mr. Moretti, Signora Moretti, is everything satisfactory this evening? Wonderful, Maria replied warmly. Especially your waitress. The manager smiled. Naomi is one of our best employees. Luca looked up. How long has she worked here? The manager seemed surprised by the question. Almost 4 years. For years. Long enough to become invisible. Long enough for people to stop asking questions. And before that? Luca asked. The manager hesitated. I am not sure, sir. Before he could continue, another voice interrupted from nearby. Before that, Mr. Whitmore said quietly, standing beside their table. She was supposed to be one of the most promising language students in the country. Maria's eyes widened. Luca slowly turned toward him. The older man looked exhausted now. Not physically, emotionally. He glanced toward the kitchen entrance where Naomi had disappeared once again. Then he said something that instantly transformed curiosity into something much deeper. And if not for me, he whispered, her life would have been completely different. For a moment, nobody spoke. The sounds of the restaurant seemed to fade beneath the weight of Mr. Whitmore's words. Maria looked at him carefully. Luca's expression remained calm, but his attention sharpened immediately. What do you mean? Maria asked softly. Mr. Whitmore pulled out a chair and sat down slowly. He looked toward the kitchen entrance once more before answering. 10 years ago, Naomi Carter was preparing to attend one of the most prestigious language programs in the country. He smiled faintly. She was extraordinary, not just talented. Extraordinary. Luca listened without interruption. She could move between languages the way musicians move between notes. Mr. Whitmore shook his head. Italian, French, Arabic, Spanish, sign language. Linguistics professors were already talking about her future. Maria's eyes widened. Then what happened? The older man looked down at his hands. The answer did not come immediately. Life happened, he finally said. The kind of life no scholarship can solve. Luca remained silent. Mr. Whitmore continued. I was the director of a foundation that supported gifted students. Naomi received one of our largest awards. His voice grew quieter. Then her grandmother became seriously ill. Maria's face softened instantly. The woman who raised her? Yes. He nodded. Everything changed after that. Medical bills. Family responsibilities. A younger brother who depended on her. He exhaled slowly. Suddenly she had to choose between her future and the people she loved. Luca already knew the answer. So did Maria. She chose her family, Maria whispered. Mr. Whitmore nodded. Every opportunity we offered, she turned down. He laughed sadly. At first I thought she was making a mistake. I spent months trying to convince her otherwise. Did it work? Maria asked. No, a small smile appeared on his face. Because she was stronger than all of us. Across the room, Naomi appeared carrying a tray of drinks. She moved through the restaurant with the same calm grace as before. Most people never looked twice at her. They saw a waitress, a uniform, a name tag. They did not see the story. They never asked. Mr. Whitmore watched her carefully. The last time I saw her before tonight, she was 20 years old. His eyes grew distant. She thanked everyone for believing in her. Then she walked away. Maria slowly touched the silver bracelet on her own wrist. And you never saw her again? No, why not? Mr. Whitmore hesitated. Because I was ashamed. Luca finally spoke. Ashamed of what? The older man looked directly at him. Because I spent years celebrating talent while failing to understand sacrifice. Silence settled over the table. Somewhere nearby, glasses clinked softly. A waiter laughed. Life continued around them, yet something deeper had entered the room. Something larger than language, larger than success, larger even than opportunity. Then Maria suddenly sat upright. Her eyes widened. A memory had finally arrived. The bracelet, she whispered. Luca turned toward her. Manga. She was no longer looking at him. She was staring directly at Naomi. I remember now. Mr. Whitmore frowned. Remember what? Maria's voice trembled slightly. That bracelet does not belong to Naomi's grandmother. Luca felt his pulse quicken. Maria slowly shook her head. It belonged to someone from my family. For several seconds, Neither Luca nor Mr. Whitmore spoke. Maria's eyes remained fixed on Naomi, as though she were looking through time itself. The restaurant lights reflected softly in her teacup. Her hands trembled ever so slightly. "Mama," Luca said gently. "What are you talking about?" Maria took a slow breath. "Many years ago, before you were born, my Aunt Isabella owned a bracelet exactly like that one." Mr. Whitmore frowned. "Exactly like it?" Maria nodded. "Not similar."
Exact.
Her gaze never left Naomi. The design was custom-made. In Sicily, our family commissioned only 3 of them. Luca felt his curiosity deepen. "What happened to them?" Maria looked down for a moment. "One belonged to my grandmother. One belonged to my Aunt Isabella. The third disappeared after Isabella immigrated to America." Mr. Whitmore leaned forward. "You believe Naomi's grandmother knew your family?" "I do not know." Maria shook her head slowly. "But I know that bracelet." Across the room, Naomi continued serving customers, completely unaware of the conversation unfolding around her. A young couple thanked her for refilling their coffee. She smiled warmly and wished them a pleasant evening. The simple interaction only deepened the mystery. She moved through the restaurant with the same quiet dignity she had shown all night. Nothing about her behavior suggested she was hiding anything. Yet hidden stories seemed to follow her wherever she went.
Luca watched carefully.
For the first time in years, a business negotiation no longer occupied his thoughts. Numbers, contracts, markets, they all seemed distant now. He found himself focused entirely on one question. Who was Naomi Carter? Then something unexpected happened. Maria slowly stood from her chair. Luca immediately rose as well.
"Manga."
She smiled reassuringly. "Relax. I am only going to speak with her." Before he could object, Maria began walking across the dining room. Her pace was slow but determined. Naomi noticed her approaching and immediately stepped forward. "Signora, is everything all right?" Maria reached for her hand. "More than all right." Naomi seemed surprised. "Can we talk for a moment?" Maria asked. "Of course." They moved toward a quieter corner near a large window overlooking the city lights. Luca remained where he was, unable to hear the conversation. Yet he could see their faces clearly. First, Naomi listened politely. Then Maria said something. Naomi's expression changed instantly. Her eyes widened. She looked down at the bracelet, then back at Maria, then down again. Luca felt his pulse quicken. Whatever Maria had said mattered. Very much. Several moments passed. Naomi spoke softly. Maria listened. Then, to Luca's complete surprise, tears appeared in Maria's eyes. Not tears of sadness. Something else. Recognition. Wonder. Memory. Naomi looked equally stunned. She carefully removed the bracelet from her wrist and placed it in Maria's hands. The older woman stared at it for several long seconds before closing her fingers around it. When she finally looked up again, her voice was barely above a whisper. Yet Luca could read the words on her lips. "My dear," she said, "tell me everything you know about your grandmother." Naomi looked down at the bracelet resting in Maria's hands, and for a moment seemed transported somewhere far away. The noise of the restaurant faded from her awareness. The customers, the conversations, the clinking glasses, none of it seemed to exist. There was only the bracelet and the memory attached to it. "My grandmother's name was Elena Romano," Naomi said softly. Maria inhaled sharply. Luca saw the reaction immediately. It was not surprise. It was recognition. Real recognition.
Romano, Maria whispered.
"Dear God." Naomi's eyes widened. "You know that name?" Maria slowly nodded. "Elena Romano was my cousin." The words seemed impossible even as they were spoken. Naomi stared at her in complete silence. For years she had carried fragments of stories, old photographs, faded letters written in Italian, memories shared by a grandmother who rarely spoke about her early life. Yet suddenly those fragments were no longer floating alone. They were connecting, forming something larger, something real. "My grandmother told me she lost contact with her family after coming to America," Naomi said quietly. She always wanted to find them again. Maria's eyes filled with tears. We searched too. Naomi blinked. You did. For years. Maria smiled sadly. Then time passed. People moved. Records disappeared. Eventually everyone assumed the connection had been lost forever. Luca listened without interrupting. The conversation felt less like a coincidence and more like the final piece of a puzzle that had been waiting decades to be completed. Naomi reached into the pocket of her apron and carefully removed a small folded photograph. The edges were worn from age. I keep this with me every day, she said. Maria accepted it with trembling hands. The photograph showed a young woman standing beside a stone house overlooking the sea. The resemblance was unmistakable. Maria pressed her fingers against her lips. That is her, she whispered. That is Elena. Naomi's eyes glistened. She raised me after my parents passed away. Maria looked up. Then she raised you exactly the way she lived. With strength. For a moment neither woman spoke. They simply looked at each other. Two lives separated by generations and distance. Suddenly connected by a story neither had expected to find. Across the room, Mr. Whitmore watched quietly. Even he seemed moved by what he was witnessing. Then Maria turned toward Luca. Her smile returned for the first time in years with the brightness of someone rediscovering a piece of home. Now I understand, she said. Luca frowned slightly. Understand what? Maria glanced toward Naomi. Why she knew the dialect. Why she knew the expressions. Why she felt familiar the moment I saw her. Naomi lowered her eyes modestly. I am still just a waitress. Maria immediately shook her head. No, my dear. Her voice carried a warmth that silenced every doubt in the room. You were never just anything. And as Luca looked at Naomi standing there in a simple black uniform, carrying memories, languages, sacrifice, and dignity that nobody had bothered to see, he realized his mother was absolutely right. The evening slowly returned to normal, but for Luca Moretti, nothing felt the same. The chandeliers still glowed above the dining room. Guests still discussed business deals and weekend plans. Servers still moved between tables carrying trays and coffee cups. Yet the room looked different now. Or perhaps he was the one who had changed. Naomi eventually returned to her work. Not because the mystery had ended, but because responsibilities remained. A customer needed a check. Another needed directions. Someone wanted more coffee. She handled each request with the same patience and grace she had shown all night.
No announcement. No celebration.
No expectation of recognition. Luca watched her quietly. For years, he had built his life around achievement. Titles, acquisitions, numbers on reports. Yet the woman across the room carried something far more difficult to measure. Character, the kind earned through sacrifice. The kind that remained invisible until someone took the time to see it. Maria gently squeezed his hand. Now you understand.
Luca nodded slowly.
I think I am beginning to. Before leaving, Maria asked Naomi to sit with them for a few minutes. At first Naomi hesitated. Then she accepted. They spoke about Sicily, about Elena Romano, about family recipes and stories passed down through generations. The conversation felt effortless, natural, as though a missing branch of a family tree had quietly found its way home. When it was finally time to leave, Maria stood and embraced Naomi. Your grandmother would be very proud of you, she said softly. Naomi blinked back tears and smiled. Thank you. Then Maria placed the silver bracelet back into Naomi's hands. Keep it. Naomi looked surprised. Are you sure? Maria nodded. It belongs exactly where it is. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the night sky. Luca and Maria walked toward their waiting car. Halfway there, Luca stopped and looked back through the restaurant window. Naomi was helping an elderly customer put on a coat. Just a small act of kindness. One nobody else seemed to notice. Maria followed his gaze and smiled. The world is full of remarkable people, she said. Most of them are hidden behind ordinary jobs. Luca remained silent for a moment. Then he smiled too. because the most valuable thing he had discovered that evening was not a business opportunity, a family connection, or a forgotten piece of history. It was a simple truth. The people we overlook often carry entire worlds inside them. And sometimes, all it takes is one conversation to change everything.